Hey, welcome to the Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer. On this show, we interview the movers and the shakers in the world of property development and real estate. Now, this show is supported by something that few developers have quietly been using on their projects to get them funded and sold faster. Now, that's without touching traditional 3D models. It's early, it's clever, and it is changing how people see off-plan property. I'll leave it there, but if you're curious, message me on LinkedIn at Glen Palmer online or check out the show notes below. So, on today's show, I am delighted to be joined by Steve. How do you say your surname, Steve?
Dubin.
Steve Dubin. Now, Steve operates at the intersection of building science and modular construction, with hands-on insight visiting more than 80 modular factories all across North America. Steve has a uniquely informed perspective on what truly drives performance, efficiency, and consistency in factory-built environments. Steve, really appreciate you taking your time out to come and have a chat with me, especially on a Monday morning. I appreciate that, bud.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I know it ain't Monday morning for you.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And
Early for me, late time for bed for you.
that's it. And you know, we've spoken before. I'm fascinated about the modular building in construction, so this one is going to be a really good one for me. So let's kick it off with a question that I ask all my guests. If time travel became a reality, you had a chance to go back in time to when you first started your career, what advice would the person you now tell your younger self?
Well, the first thing I would say is Back to the Future 2 was complete BS because there's still no flying cars, and that took place in 2015. And here we are in 2026. But in all seriousness, I appreciate you sending me that question because it gave me some time to think about it.
Yeah,
I think I would tell my younger self that always be mindful that real loyalty between you and a company you work for is a two-way street. Um, and oftentimes, well, it's supposed to be a two-way street. How about that? It
yeah,
rarely actually is. So take care of yourself, do the best you can for the company you work for, be as ethical as you can, be a good hard worker, but make sure you're loyal to yourself and what you're working for, which is yourself and your family,
hmm,
ultimately. If you mistake that your loyalty is only for the company, you'll find out at some point when things go wrong, the company will take care of itself,
yeah.
and you'll have a tough time coming out of that. So I know that sounds kind of weird and maybe a little bit doomsday say, but I've had a couple unfortunate things happen in my career that made it very difficult for me to climb back up, and
Yeah,
it was based on how much loyalty I gave versus how much I was getting.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's quite an important thing because you can work hard all your life for a company, give them as much loyalty as they want, but when the proverbial hits the fan, it's normally the person that gets the boot. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you there, mate. So over your career, Steve, you've visited close to over 80 modular factories. Now that's across the US.
Mhm.
Now that's a lot of modular factories. What are the biggest differences you've seen between how they operate and what separates like the most really efficient ones from the rest of the pack?
I would say intercommunication is what separates the most successful ones I've seen versus the ones that struggle to continue to scale like they want to. I've actually been to 83 now since you and I
Nice.
initially talked because I was about to head to Northern Indiana to visit a few more when you and I first had our conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and everything I'm going to answer for you today comes from the perspective of a salesman, of building products, specifically insulation. You mentioned the energy efficiency thing that
Yeah.
go that would be useful to a modular factory of all types. We say modular, it's kind of a generic vernacular when you're talking about volumetric modules.
Yeah.
But really, more of my focus is factory-based construction. So some of it is modular, a good portion of it is. Some is panels, some might be manufactured housing, like
Hmm.
the generic term would be like the trailers, although it's much more expansive than that now. Um,
Yeah.
and other types of more like commercially focused things like data center storage units and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of different modular factories I go into. So I'd say from the perspective of this question, I'll stick with kind of the guys that actually do housing in one form or another, volumetric housing.
Yeah.
Um, the thing that separates the successful ones is communication internally. When the top is in good communication with, I don't want to say the bottom, but the factory floor to make sure that things stay efficient is the biggest difference. Sometimes I don't see the production staff have a very good communication with maybe the purchasing staff on the supply chains side, who isn't necessarily getting things in the timely fashion for what they have on the books with what they might have booked with a developer. Um, and sometimes even the architect or the designer is not necessarily as involved in the production process as he is in the design process. There needs to be coherent communication from top
Yeah.
to bottom. I would say that should be the case with traditional construction too, but that's the world I come from, and I know that ain't the case there. So.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And from the many, many property development conferences that I've visited, modular construction seems to be often talked about as the future of construction. Now, from your perspective, how is it actually changing the way buildings are designed, how they're engineered, and how they're delivered? And what are the benefits that you can see from, modular construction, and what are the actual limitations of it as well?
The benefits, I think it's speed to occupancy is the biggest benefit. I think the common mistake that people make that don't know about modular construction is that it's cheaper and faster. And it should be faster, but should it be cheaper? Not really. It's if you want a quality build that's built to the same standards as a traditional construction, that means they have to use the same materials, maybe
Yeah.
even better materials. And now you're putting it within a factory-based environment where you're going to have more consistency and higher quality. So why should that be cheaper? So people need to not look at the cheaper element of it. It's how fast can they get what, like, let's say a hotel or an apartment owner that's having it built in modular would say, how quick can they get heads in beds? Or I like to say
Yeah.
butts in beds. It's if the site work is going on at the same time as the actual construction of the product, then you're saving 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, depending on the size of the
Yeah.
project. And that is way more valuable. That's where the savings are.
Yeah.
That's where the money can be made from modular, not from the actual build itself. It's from the use of the end product.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say, as far as how it's changed, you mentioned something about how it's talked about as the future. Yeah, it is often talked about as the future, but the sad thing about it is it's only talked about that because it hasn't made significant headway as a percentage of construction. Right now, it accounts for somewhere between 6 and 10, depending on the focus, whether it's multifamily or hospitals or single family. It's different ranges there, but it
Yeah.
still maintains the smaller percentage of construction. And part of that is because regulations that surround um, the inspection of it or the standards it has to meet. There's a lot of confusion between here in the US, federal codes, state codes, even local city jurisdictional codes. And I think that's what kind of makes it always seem like it's supposed to be the future. Whereas prefab construction has been around since the first time people saw it in a Sears catalog. Heck, the
Yeah.
pyramids were prefab.
Yeah. So, Steve, given your background in building envelope and energy performance, how important are early stage design decisions in modular and where changes can later be far more difficult than traditional construction?
Yeah, and not just difficult, but expensive.
Yeah.
Someone told me a phrase, and I can't remember exactly how it went. It was almost good enough to put on a t-shirt. But basically, it came down to beating the code now. And I say beating, not meeting, because everyone has to meet the code. But the code is changing constantly, especially in the energy performance part of it, that that I'm pretty much involved with as an installation guy. But beating the code now is easier and cheaper than suddenly being forced to meet it later when the design of the project and the construction possibly has already started. That's when it
Yeah,
becomes expensive and difficult. Not necessarily in the materials you need to change, but changing the process of what you're doing in that particular part, whether it's a roof assembly, a wall assembly, or maybe some sort of mechanical changes that you have to do that I don't know much about myself, but yeah, early adoption within the factory or even on site on traditional construction is better than trying to fix it later, for
yeah,
sure. So you want to make sure that's enacted all the way from the design stage down. We talked about the communication element of a successful modular factory. That communication element also takes place in making sure that the design and the codes are met early, early
yeah,
on. And in
yeah,
modular, that's important too, because a lot of these factories are building in one jurisdiction, but they're shipping to 10 others.
yeah,
If you can find a way that you can meet or beat all those codes in one in the early phase, that would make it so much more efficient going forward.
yeah. When you're working with the different modular teams, do you see digital visualization or 3D modeling playing a much bigger role in helping factories, designers, and developers align before that production begins?
If I'm being honest, I don't run into that aspect of it too much within my role. I do see it come up. I do see a lot of factories talking about it. I say a lot. I wouldn't say it's even close to the majority, though.
Yeah.
Um, some people say that modular is traditional construction in a garage, and I know some people take offense to that in the modular world, but I can't say that I don't understand where the phrase comes from. A lot of this stuff is traditional construction done under a roof,
Yeah.
and done with some of the same old methods, the same old tools, the same old design process and blueprints and things like that, where they're not necessarily using 3D modeling, but it's coming. I see a lot of digitization coming up within the modular world, using AI as an ERP system, as a call report, even for call reports for the sales end of modular. I see a lot more of that coming up. But
Yeah.
adoption of new things, just like with traditional construction, is a very slow process, even in
Yeah.
modular
Takes time.
construction.
Yeah. And moving on from that, so do you think that being able to walk all the stakeholders through a modular project visually, showing the different sequencing, the layouts, the performance considerations, do you think that would help reduce friction and speed up adoption?
Yeah, I do. And I've seen it a few times with some of the more forward moving and thinking factories where they actually do have that 3D digital output. They're showing people how to put it together. There's even one factory in Pennsylvania that actually, once they're done building the modules, they actually build the entire building at their factory out in their essentially their parking lot to make sure that the sequencing works,
Wow.
and then they disassemble it again and bring it to the actual job site. It's a pretty phenomenal thing. But also, I think that would help people that don't necessarily understand what modular can do. They think they know what, like they could spot a modular home or a modular building while driving down the freeway. Not anymore. Some of these
Yeah.
things are just architecturally some of the most interesting projects you can see. And I think people would be more apt to get into modular if they could see what that might look like earlier in the process, using
Yeah.
what you just described there for sure. Recently, I saw a house go up in Colorado. I didn't see it myself, but it was built in a factory in Minnesota, and it's over an 8,000 square foot mansion, and it
Wow.
is gorgeous. And there's no way that the person would have been okay with making that house modular without knowing and seeing what that could have potentially looked like early on in the process,
Yeah.
using like what you described there with the 3D modeling and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I had a guy on. I don't know if you know him, David Johnson, from Gingerbread Homes. He's doing amazing things with modular AI, and Yeah, basically what
Love
he,
the name of his company, by the way.
yeah, I do as well. I do as well. So basically what he's come up with is let's say you buy a plot of land, you get your house, you you use the AI it's robotics as well, and modular. They obviously build it in the factory, take it to the plot, put it on the plot, and let's say for some reason you don't like the area anymore, or the area's gone downhill, or something, or and you want to move, but you love the house. Basically, you can contact him. He will then come, disassemble the house, and put it on the new plot with you for you. So I think
Wow,
I think that's phenomenal.
that
I
is
think that's
phenomenal.
phenomenal. And that's where I see modular eventually getting to the stage where, yeah, I like my house. I like, you know, what it presents. I brought my kids up in this house. I brought my grandkids up in this house. I want to keep this house, but I want to move to a new location. So I could just pretty much disassemble it. Off you go, flat pack it, off to a new location, build it up in a new location. I
I
think,
love that. That's
yeah,
phenomenal.
me too. So, Steve, thanks again for coming on the show and sharing your
I appreciate you
expertise.
having me.
Really do think that modular construction for me is going to play a huge role in property development in the future. And I'm excited to see how it's going to evolve, really.
Yeah. It's not a
Um,
matter of if, it's a matter
it's
of when.
when. Yeah. And I want to take this
Yeah.
opportunity again to thank my listeners and viewers of YouTube as well. Appreciate you all. Steve, just before we finish up, if listeners or viewers want to get in contact with you, find out what you do and how to get hold of you, how do they do that?
I think for listeners here, since it's probably the easiest way to do it, find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on that because the modular community, both in Europe and here in North America, is very active on there. You'll find me on there, and my email and phone number is right through that as well. I make sure that it's public so people can reach out to me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. And a quick reminder to everyone, this episode was sponsored by a PropTech visual platform that is changing how forward-thinking developers plan, pitch, and sell. Not very mainstream yet, but it will be. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, you know exactly where to find me. You've been listening to Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and today I was joined by Steve Dubin. Thanks again for listening and watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.